I'm Max Brantley with the Arkansas Times on Wednesday, April 15th. Taxes are due today if you didn't already know it. Top news in Arkansas today. First, the state education department has issued for the first time state school report cards that are based on a letter grade. We've graded schools before on a numerical basis. The legislature in 2013 dictated a letter grade, more like school scores. This takes into account this year a new form of school testing, which has had some bad effects on some schools. On balance, some 800 schools in the state made scores of C, B, and A. Some 200 made below that grade. The Little Rock School District was about split, a few more schools scoring with D's and F's and scoring A, B's, or C's, but a good solid number of schools that are scoring on the high end. The state education department cautions not to necessarily take these scores as a measure of teachers or schools or even students, and of course we know that's true. What some people fail to emphasize when we look at these scores is that inevitably school scores are a product of the raw material given to them. We know nationwide, regrettably, that being poor and being in a minority group generally means a lower test score. What we don't yet have, and what in months ahead we perhaps will have, will be some analysis of this number that show where schools that have great students don't do so well, and schools that have not so great students based on expectations of poverty particularly have managed to exceed expectations. I think those are more meaningful numbers. I look forward to seeing those coming. Controversy still continues over Asa Hutchins' appointment of 3 special justices to decide who will have jurisdiction in the same-sex marriage case. He appointed 3 Republicans to the court. 2 of them were Republican politicians. One of them was a politician, Sean Womack, who as a state senator pushed notoriously anti-gay legislation and said some pretty outrageous things. It seems a funny appointment for somebody who's going to sit on a case directly related to marriage equality and sexual orientation. But there's an even more direct conflict for Betty Dickey, a former Supreme Court Justice Republican candidate. She supported Leslie Rutledge in her race for Attorney General just a few months ago. She's now been appointed by the governor to decide a case in which Leslie Rutledge is not only a party, but the party that brought about the hearing which she's going to decide. The appearance that she might favor her good friend Leslie Rutledge is unavoidable, even if she tries her hardest to be fair in this case. The governor so far has refused to answer questions about why he's appointed Dickey despite her obvious conflict with Leslie Rutledge. Elsewhere today, more news from the Democrat Gazette in the fascinating case over judicial bribery in Faulkner County. Mike Maggio, you may know, has admitted he took a bribe in the form of campaign contributions to reduce a verdict in a nursing home negligence case. Other people have been not named in the case, but a civil suit over the lawsuit claims that a nursing home owner in Fort Smith gave $100,000 to the UCA, where former Senator Gilbert Baker was then employed, as a form of payoff to Baker for getting money from Morton to Maggio to affect the outcome of that case. Now, I want to emphasize Morton and Baker haven't been charged with a crime, and they say they're innocent. Nonetheless, the circumstances are pretty smelly. But Ann Clemmer, a former congressional candidate, former legislator, said she's been talked to the FBI just for background information, you understand, about matters related to this case. I hope this means the federal prosecutors are looking deeply into Gilbert Baker's bundling activities, that is, serving as the go-between between campaign money and candidates. He was heavily involved in races for judgeships in Faulkner County. Rhonda Wood, who sits on the Supreme Court now, is a friend of Gilbert Baker's from Faulkner County, a friend of Mike Maggio's back in the day before he became tarred. More than half of her initial campaign money came from Michael Morton and another nursing home owner with ties to Gilbert Baker. Perhaps she has some background information as well. Big news on the national scene today in the presidential race. Hillary Clinton has given an interview to a media outlet that says she now believes that same-sex couples have a constitutional right to marry. This represents an evolution. She has said in the past that while she supported same-sex marriage, she thought the campaign to get it done state by state was the way to go. Now she favors a constitutional solution. The U.S. Supreme Court may give us that next week. I predict a lot of people will criticize her for flip-flopping. A lot of people will cheer her for changing her position. After all, a lot of people have changed their position over the years on this. But I'd also observe those who are ready to say this is somehow a political ploy haven't looked around themselves very much in Arkansas and the rest of the South, and even some other swing states. Being for same-sex marriage rights and gay rights in general is not necessarily a political winner. This is still a minority group after all. In Jonesboro last night, a Jonesboro policeman killed a man who attacked him with a machete. In Woodruff County this week, a judge has said he's found that the state's criminal eviction statute is unconstitutional. He's the second judge to do that. Other cases are pending. We have the worst landlord-tenant laws in the state. We make a crime out of not paying your rent and send people to jail for it. We're the only state in the country to do that. Perhaps we can get a solution from the court that people could not get from the legislature at the last session, one of many decisions that went against poor people in the legislature this last session. The head of the Quapaw Indian Tribe was before the city board last night talking about land he recently purchased here. He was met by a number of city officials who seemed anxious to get him to promise never, ever, ever to talk about building a casino on that land. He says that's not their intention right now, but they do have casinos in other states. But you know, he said something funny when Dean Compuris tried to get him to agree to some sort of stipulation on this land. He said, "We're not negotiating a treaty here, Director Compuris." And he also said Indian tribes have had sort of bad experiences in making agreements with government agencies in the past on how they'd be treated. A good point by John Berry, the head of the Quapaw Indians in Oklahoma. And finally, the Little Rock City Board talked last night for the first time about its civil rights ordinance, which would extend civil rights protections on grounds of sexual orientation, both to city employees and required of people who do business with the city. This was quite an orchestrated dance last night. Most directors seem to be in favor of it. Joan Adcock definitely is not. Irma Hendricks seems not to be. B.J. Wyrick brought up the pressing question of whether this ordinance was designed to present a legal challenge to a recently adopted state law that is aimed at preventing cities and counties from extending any form of civil rights protection. B.J. Wyrick happens to be a member of the Hutchinson administration, works for somebody who used to work for her husband as a Republican campaigner. It might be hard for her to vote against the Republican wishes on this, which is to vote against gay rights in nearly every case. Kathy Webb, who's sponsored this ordinance, thinks she has the votes, but a lot of things can happen between now and next week when the subject is supposed to come up for a vote. The Little Rock Chamber of Commerce did stand out for this ordinance. That's a good sign. Perhaps Little Rock can regain a bit of a reputation as a progressive city. We'll see next week. I'm Max Brantley. I'll be back tomorrow.